So earlier today, I saw the latest John Oliver video pop up in my newsfeed, and I've decided to make a few comments on the video. Now, I want to preface this by saying that I actually like John Oliver quite a bit. I'd say of all the post-Jon Stewart political commentators, he seems to be the least possessed by ideology. What I've always liked about the show was his honest attempt to share stories in a funny and somewhat objective manner. And that might have changed a little bit since the election, but I'd say he still does a much better job than the Trevor Noahs, the Samantha Bees, and the Jordan Kleppers out there, at least in my opinion. And he also seems to at least make an effort to talk about issues that aren't getting a lot of coverage, which I really respect. Now, that being said, I often do see things I find pretty frustrating in his videos, and this most recent video is no exception. Now, I do encourage you to go back and watch the full video and form your own opinion, but I'll try and give just as brief a summary as I can. So the latest video is about Facebook, and it actually touches on some big stories that have been in the news lately, mostly involving hate speech, online censorship, and internet use in Myanmar specifically.
Facebook has been accused of empowering authoritarians. Viral rumours and hateful comments on Facebook have been linked to outbreaks of deadly violence. But for the worst distillation of what Facebook can do to a country, just look at Myanmar.
Now, this episode is mostly about the ongoing crisis in Myanmar. And for those that don't know, there's been some ethnic tensions in a state of Myanmar known as Rakhine, where a sizable Muslim minority is being mistreated, oppressed, and persecuted. And some sources have even described the situation as ethnic cleansing and genocide. Now, he spends most of the video discussing Facebook's inability to effectively police hate speech.
Hate speech against Muslims, and especially the Rohingya, flourished on Facebook.
He talks a lot about things like Facebook's AI not being compatible with Burmese font, not having enough Burmese-speaking staff to police content, that sort of thing.
Facebook does have standards that are enforced in a number of ways. They have artificial intelligence. They also rely on users like you and me to flag objectionable content. And Facebook's system failed them at every stage. First, their AI didn't work because Facebook's technology isn't compatible with Myanmar's language font. And it's not like Facebook can plead ignorance or surprise about any of this.
Then he finishes up with a video of people from around the world calling Facebook stupid.
Facebook drastisk. Facebook is a toilet.
Now, I have to say, I do agree with John Oliver on that point. Facebook is a giant garbage pit. I try and go on Facebook as infrequently as possible, and every time I do, I'm reminded why I usually stay away to begin with. It's really a waste of time. However, the discussion of community guidelines and hate speech censorship is an important one, and one that's not going away anytime soon. Now, we can all look at obvious cases like the Alex Joneses of the world and agree that a lot of what they say is reprehensible and really should be condemned, but banning hate speech is not the right course of action for a number of reasons. I think the best counterpoint to bad speech is not censorship or less speech, but better speech. The best way to counter bad ideas is to call them out and prove that your ideas are better. Ignoring or banning bad ideas just allows them to fester, spread, and in the absence of debate and exposure to better ideas, just metastasize into something even worse. And as John Oliver pointed out, Facebook isn't responsible for the unrest in Myanmar. In 2013, I think about 1% of the population had access to Facebook. And there were violent protests before that in 2012, and those weren't the first instances of ethnic tension in the region. But John Oliver does assert that Facebook, specifically the spread of hate speech via Facebook's platform, has fanned the flames of ethnic unrest in Myanmar. And that may be the case to some extent, but John Oliver's biggest issue seems to be the ineffective enforcement of Facebook's community guidelines. As in, if we could just do a better job of identifying and removing hate speech, it would be a good step in the right direction. Unfortunately, these types of discussions always leave out the most important detail. What constitutes hate speech and who gets to make that call? Who gets to decide? Those on the left that are okay with censoring can never really give us a concrete definition of what hate speech is, and neither can these social media companies, which instead opt for broad, intentionally vague community guidelines that are, by their very nature, open to interpretation. And that's the problem. Because the thing is, what offends me is different from what offends you. And something that you and I find fairly innocuous may be extremely disturbing to someone else. Hate speech is by its very nature subjective. So who gets to decide? Is it the government? I really don't think John Oliver wants Donald Trump deciding what speech deserves to be banned. Or, I don't know, maybe do you leave that decision up to the more progressive politicians in the government? Except even their beliefs are subject to change. Here's what the last 3 Democratic presidential candidates had to say about same-sex marriage at certain points in the last 20 years.
Marriage is not just a bond, but a sacred bond between a man and a woman.
I believe that marriage is between a man and a woman.
And who knows what acceptable views of today will be, viewed as wrong, think, or hate speech tomorrow. So I don't know, maybe leave it up to the young people. They're usually the wokest of the woke, right? Except for the fact that the generation after millennials, Gen Z, is shaping up to be the most conservative generation since World War II. I think their definition of hate speech will be a little bit looser once they become the target demographic, so I doubt John Oliver wants them deciding either. But okay, maybe just trust the social media companies, right? They know what's right. Except their progressive understanding of what constitutes inappropriate speech seems a little less progressive in countries like China, where Google is apparently cooperating with the Chinese government to develop a search engine that's compatible with Chinese government censorship rules. So at the end of the day, the only definition you have to go off of is your own, and everyone's definition of what's offensive or inappropriate or hate speech will be different. Because of that, you can either have unrestricted free speech or no free speech at all. There's really no in-between. And I don't want to make this some kind of slippery slope argument where, hey, one day you ban Alex Jones for spreading hateful, crazy ideas. Next thing you know, they'll be rounding everyone up just for signing into their Gmail account. No, I'm not saying that. But if you believe it's acceptable to ban certain speech on the basis of arbitrary and purposely vague guidelines, you're setting a dangerous precedent. And one that can't end well. And it's not too hard to see early results of these types of policies. There was that Texas newspaper, for example, whose Facebook page was flagged for posting passages from the Declaration of Independence. So, at the end of the day, how well hate speech policies are enforced is somewhat irrelevant, because no one seems to be able to give a solid definition of what constitutes hate speech in the first place. But you know who does do a great job at effectively enforcing arbitrary guidelines regarding inappropriate and offensive speech? The Burmese government. Here's a brief excerpt from Myanmar's Computer Science and Development Act, which regulates acceptable internet and computer usage in Myanmar. Whoever commits any of the following acts using a computer network or any information technology shall, on conviction, be punished with imprisonment for a term which may extend from a minimum of 7 years to a maximum of 15 years, and may also be liable to a fine. And these are the acts that aren't permitted. Carrying out any act which undermines state security, prevalence of law and order, and community peace and tranquility, national unity, state economy, or national culture. Sounds pretty harmless, right? I mean, aside from the excessive prison sentence. But really, who could disagree with preventing content that undermines peace, tranquility, and national unity? That sounds like a good thing. Except the government has used arbitrary guidelines like these to block topics related to pornography, human rights, political reform, and politically sensitive topics according to the Open Net Initiative. Many sites have also been blocked for quote-unquote suspicious keywords or phrases, such as drugs, military government, democracy, student movement, or 8888, a reference to a series of anti-government protests in 1988. And by the way, a lot of people have been arrested under these arbitrary guidelines as well. Government censorship has been entrenched in Burmese government and society since there was a coup d'etat in 1962, and I'd say it's that lack of access to information that really helps fan the flames of ethnic tension, not Facebook's half-hearted enforcement of their own censorious guidelines. Ignorant, hateful ideas thrive in the absence of information, not in an open and free market of ideas. But hey, that's the government, right? I mean, Facebook and Google are private companies. They can do what they want, right? I hear that argument a lot, and I think that argument is such a cop-out, because here's the thing. social media companies make their money off of you. You are the product. They can't continue to operate without your interaction. So it's even more important that you come out and say, hey, I use social media to access information. If you try to limit my access to information, I'll leave. I'll go somewhere else. And you can't just wait until they go after content you agree with. You have to stand up for everyone's freedom of speech as a principle. Yes, even those you disagree with, even the crazy ones. And by the way, has the left always been so accepting of the idea of large corporations restricting what content you can and can't view online? I forgot. What were their thoughts on limiting net neutrality again?
No, this cannot happen.
Oh, that's right. So ISPs throttling content to make an extra buck is unacceptable. But large social media companies deciding what content you can and can't handle, that's totally okay, right? I don't know. I think you can't bubble wrap the world around us to make it safer. You'll just end up soundproofing society. But let me know what you guys think. Is all this talk about online censorship overblown, or do you think it actually does set a dangerous precedent? Share your opinions in the comments below, and please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I'd really appreciate it. And if you do, I promise I won't tell the Burmese government censors you watch this video. Thanks, guys, and have a great day.